Okay, so we talk about this on the podcast all the time, that I want to help you not only understand the news, but I want to help you make the news and make it better. And so here we are. We just got to Cucuta, Colombia. Okay, and I met a woman on the plane who missed her flight, so she's stuck here in Cucuta. So it's such a simple thing to fix this problem. It's about $18 to get them a room for the night down close to the border. It's another 10 or so to get them a taxi. So for $28 or $30, we can save them from having to sleep on the street tonight, or who knows what they'd have to do. So that's what we're going to do.
This is the Hot Zone. Engaging with the news in a whole new way, international war correspondent Chuck Holton brings insight into areas of crisis and lets you help those affected.
¿Cómo es su nombre?
Loreiva.
Dielma. De Venezuela. Abogada.
Mérida, Venezuela.
Well, she's a lawyer from Merida, but she's got another 6 hours after she crosses the border into Venezuela tomorrow. And she's got her lovely friend here that she also met in the airport. Dame su nombre.
Neely Zambrano.
Neely's umbrella.
Sí.
Okay. Umbrella es paraguas en inglés.
Umbrella.
Sí. Neely's paraguas. And so we're just going to get him a room. And I just did that. We're going to put him in a taxi. We're going to send him off there. And you did that with your subscriptions to the Hot Zone. So thanks for being members. I hope more of you will join so we can do more good for more people. Hey folks, Chuck Holton here. I am now back in Panama after a grueling few days in Cucuta, Colombia, right on the border with Venezuela. We got to see some amazing things and got to cross illegally into Venezuela. That was kind of fun. And got to go down and troll for prostitutes. If you haven't seen that episode, that's day before yesterday. Go check that one out. Definitely worth your time to watch. Very interesting. If you're like me and that's kind of way out of your comfort zone, I don't normally go wandering around the red light district in the middle of the night. It's worth going to watch just because it's kind of morbidly fascinating how so many people are being forced to live right now. We also got to help so many people. People like you, our subscribers, have sent a lot of money and are really jumping on board with our idea of helping the people who are most affected by the tragedies that we cover. So we're not just making the news, we're making the news better for the people being affected. And on this trip, we just got to give out so much money, and it was a blast. It was so much fun. So I want to show you in this episode just some of the people that we got to help. We got to pray with a lot of people and encourage a lot of people. And we got some very, very interesting stories throughout the week. The other thing is that Venezuela is still incredibly in crisis. This weekend on Saturday is going to really be a flashpoint. And if you're the praying kind of person, you should really pray for Venezuela over the weekend because they're going to do their best to bring in the U.S. aid that was sent by the United States down to Cucuta. And Maduro is saying he's going to deploy his troops along the border and not allow it in. That is the recipe for potentially the loss of a lot of life. Although I really don't think that's going to happen. I think probably what will happen is that the people are going to carry the aid across the border, and it's going to be kind of the death knell for the Maduro regime. That's my prayer anyway. I hope it is yours as well. I also brought back a lot of interesting souvenirs, like hundreds of thousands of dollars worth it would have been dollars, bolivars, Venezuelan bolivars, which is now worthless. But at one time, if you could backdate all the money I brought home to 2007, we'd be talking about billions of dollars. I'd be recording the next podcast from my Learjet, if that was the case. So the first day we were there, we went to church. Actually, went to 3 churches. And I just want to show you a little bit of what that was like. We got a chance to speak. My friend Graham Davis, who was there with me, got a chance to sing. And so if you're listening to the podcast, you're just going to hear some music and a little speaking and a little bit of Graham for the next 60 seconds or so. Check this out. This is Cucuta, Colombia, and we're here to worship on Sunday morning with a great little church that I've been to once before, and I just want to take you in the service and show you what that looks like. Come on. When we went to the churches, first we went to kind of a big church in Cucuta, Colombia, and then we went to a smaller daughter church of that original church, and then we went to a little church plant up in one of the worst neighborhoods where the poorest of the poor live, all Venezuelan immigrants. And just to see their faithfulness, the interesting thing to me was that if you even mention the word Venezuela, those people burst into tears. They are so distraught over what's been done to their country. And I'm still receiving messages now. A lot of people got my phone number. They're sending me tons of messages, just showing me how bad it is in pictures and videos, really blowing up my phone. And I'm going to show you a couple of those. If you're watching the podcast, we'll show you a couple of those pictures here. But it is really a dire situation. And we got a good sense of that going to the churches and visiting those on Sunday. Later on Sunday, we went down to the actual border right on the Simon Bolivar Bridge, where I've been several times before. And there were just massive amounts of people down there. Got to fly my drone. And there were some protests or marches. And that's when Marco Rubio showed up with a congressional delegation. Here's a little bit about what that sounded like. As the tragedy that is Venezuela reaches new levels of misery, nobody's quite sure who's in charge of the country. 50 nations now recognize Juan Guaido as the interim president, but one person in particular strongly disagrees. That's Nicolas Maduro, the man who's been running the country since 2013. But with more than 3 million Venezuelans having fled their homeland, and many of those left inside literally starving, here in the border town of Cucuta, Colombia, tensions along the border are coming to a head. American military aircraft have been arriving here over the past week, delivering tons of humanitarian aid intended to ease the suffering of these Venezuelans. But troops loyal to Nicolas Maduro have so far blocked the shipments from entering their country. Maduro has called the shipments unnecessary and a political stunt, but these Venezuelans beg to differ.
We need help right now. You know, our people are there, starving, dying, just waiting for what? They can't waste any more time. We need help right away. Please help American people. We need you. We need you. We beg your help.
Over the weekend, a congressional delegation from the U.S. arrived at the border to see the situation, accompanied by the Colombian ambassador to the United States, Francisco Santos Calderon.
Even though the dictator is saying that this is a provocation, the only answer that we have for him is that this is an act of love. This is an act of Christianity. This is an act that shows the moral compass of those who cannot stand by seeing the suffering of millions and millions of Venezuelans that come across this bridge dying of hunger, dying because of lack of medicine.
Senator Marco Rubio from Florida was also in attendance.
What is happening here today, what is happening in Venezuela, is a man-made crisis of epic proportions. Not caused by a natural disaster, but by a man-made one. a criminal regime that is willing to starve and kill its own people before it gives up power.
But many of those attending Sunday worship services across this city are clinging to hope for change in Venezuela and praying for peace in the process. So on Monday, we basically went to the border and then followed large groups of people who are migrating into Colombia and walking to Bogota. That's because there are some large refugee camps in Bogota. They believe there are more jobs there. And the Colombian government has really done a pretty good job of dealing with this crisis. They have been very generous in allowing up to over 1 million Venezuelans into their country. They have been very generous in providing for them, giving them a way to get jobs. Many of those Venezuelans will eventually continue on to Ecuador or Peru or someplace else where maybe they have relatives. Not a lot of them make their way to the United States. And at least at this point, I think we only had, if I remember right, something, I don't know, in the order of 4,500 or 5,000 Venezuelans every year coming to the U.S. For several years. Now, that number has jumped in the last 12 months, but that's just because things have gotten so dire inside Venezuela. And we followed the trek. These guys are walking. It was very similar to the caravans that we saw in southern Mexico. Check out what that looks like. So this is Tulio and Elixon. We met them way back in Cucuta, and they were just walking down the road. Elixon has a little abscess on his chin that needed some medical care, still does, but we did what we could to take care of it. Tulio is my age. He's got 9 children and 15 grandchildren, and they're back in Venezuela. But there's just nothing to eat, as we keep reporting. There's just nothing there for them. So they're walking along the road. They're hoping to walk about 500 kilometers from Cucuta all the way to Bogota. But they want to find little Elixon's mother. His father abandoned them, but his mother is hopefully in the next town up, because he doesn't have any documents, and he needs to get where he can get his documents so that he can go to the hospital and get treatment. So we gave them a little money to help them on their way. It's just so heartbreaking to see all the need out here, and you can't help everybody, but you can't help the ones that God puts in front of you. All along the way, it was really cool to be able to help the people that we found who were in need. And, you have to be careful about that, because when you encounter a large group of people, obviously all of them have great needs. And if you start handing out cash or diapers or anything, you're going to get mobbed in short order. And we kind of found that out the hard way. But what we figured out to do is to approach people who were traveling in small groups, just 2 to 4 people, and find out what their needs were, and then see what we could do to meet their needs. Sometimes it was just giving them a ride. Sometimes it was giving them some medical care. And sometimes it meant giving them some cash. Check out that. Sí. Pues, ajá. Sí, sí. Pues, mira la niña. A mí, es mío. So all in all, I think it was a really, really good trip, and I'm so excited about this podcast, this new project, because it is really helping people. It's enabling me to feel like I can really offer something more than just telling these people's story. But in telling their story, I'm bringing it to the world, and the world can help these people. And so I feel good about that too. If you haven't checked it out, go to opslens.com, OPSLENS.com. The podcast is going to be appearing on OpsLens TV starting, I think, today. And so we should get a whole lot of new listeners from OpsLens. If you're one of those, thanks for joining us. I think you're really going to enjoy what we have to offer here. I hope you'll stick around. And as always, please support the podcast. Leave us a review. Go to patreon.com/hotzone and subscribe. All the money that we collect is getting given away, and then some. And that's a pretty good feeling. You get a chance to be directly involved in making somebody's day on their worst day. So thanks for being part of the Hot Zone.
The Hot Zone is produced by Amy Holton and Livefire Media. Copyright 2019.